Everybody, and welcome to the reality show. Today I've got Daniel with me and Marco and Richard. How's everyone doing?
Very well, thank you.
Yeah, good, thanks.
Good.
Lovely. So today we have a couple of topics. For our secondary topic later on, we're going to be talking about UNRWA and UNRWA funding and the fact that it seems to be going bust, finally. Happy days. We'll have a little think about that. And then for our main topic, we're going to be talking about the Oscars. So the Oscars, there seems to be some controversy with it every year that it goes on now. I'm trying to think whether was it the last Oscars where Will Smith slapped Chris Rock, or was that the one before?
Oh,
The one before. Yeah, they're all a blur in my mind now. But I think this one was the 96th Oscars. So, and I kind of generally like these award shows, I guess. Like I don't hate them, but there's definitely a phenomenon in the last few years where they've become a platform for being sanctimonious about whatever political cause du jour is going on. And what was notable about the Oscars yesterday was not just who won, Cillian Murphy and Emma Stone, best actor, best actress, whatever. It was the pro-Palestinian protest that was going on outside and started actually in the morning, I think, outside and delayed the broadcast by a few minutes and was then supported by some of the, very notably by some of the actors and award winners who were in attendance. So we're going to talk a bit about that. So and one of the most notable aspects of the evening in regards to this was the speech given by Jonathan Glazer for his film Zone of Interest, which is a Holocaust movie, which is based on a novel by Martin Amis. And in his speech, he said that we here are three men who refute our Jewishness and the Holocaust being used to support a genocide and something like this. Perhaps one of you's got the quote in front of you.
Oh, should we play the clip?
Yeah, if you've got it there, let's do it.
I should have it.
So just while Daniel pulls that up, that's proved to be a very controversial speech. On Twitter is trending as hashtag Jewishness, and it's pretty much all around this statement.
Our film shows where dehumanization leads at its worst. It shaped all of our past and present. Right now, we stand here as men who refute their Jewishness and the Holocaust being hijacked by an occupation which has led to conflict for so many innocent people. Whether the victims of October the 7th in Israel or the ongoing attack on Gaza, all are victims of this dehumanization. How do we resist? Alexandra Bystroń-Kołodziejczyk, the girl who glows in the film as she did in life, chose to. I dedicate this to her memory and her resistance. Thank you.
Squish, 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 squish.
So there you go. So that's the speech which has stirred a lot of controversy. So Marco and Richard, I'll come to you first. And what do you make about the Oscars generally and the Oscars that's just gone on? But what do you make about this speech? And there's a couple of areas I guess we'll move around, but let's start with this speech.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I used to like the Oscars up to probably the early 90s. There used to be a celebration of the individual achievement of people working in the business. And, the best used to be recognized and celebrated. Nowadays, it's just a collective smear of people trying to outdo each other on altruism and the art of virtue signaling. So it really makes me vomit nowadays. It's exactly the opposite of what it should be. Just look at that cretin the street as a gag. Haha, we all laughed, didn't we? It was one of the most forced gags on the planet. So I watched it reluctantly, and I particularly disliked what Jonathan Glazer did. He could have come out quite on top of morally on this one, but he chose to go down a pit of despair. Effectively, he's making a film which shows how Germans chose not to be aware of the genocide that was going on, the Holocaust. And then because he probably realized that you can apply the same criteria to the people in Gaza, i.e. in a highly dense population, you're telling me that the adults don't know who is Hamas and where the hostages are kept. Probably because of that reason, effectively admitting that there are no adult innocent people in Gaza, he decided to go the other way and try to see how on the fence he's sitting, how much he doesn't care about one part or the other, because he just wants peace in the world. Sorry, I'm still so touched.
I think, yeah, what Michael said there is absolutely true. And it's the mixed economy effect taking place even in the culture, isn't it? Because even within the Oscars ceremony, you've got the legacy of that best of the best mentality mixed up with all this virtue signaling, political grandstanding, all of that kind of stuff is mixed up together. So the bits that you like, or that you know, people like us would want to champion, which is, you know, celebrating success, celebrating productivity, celebrating talent, that's in there still to some level, but it's all poisoned and diluted and grayed out by all the other elements of it. So it's a case of choosing what to ignore at the same time as choosing what to celebrate, knowing that other people are making the exact opposite calculation and choosing to praise the virtue signaling over the talent and the merit that we watch it for and what it should represent, really. I think it's no surprise, really, that Hollywood and the Oscars are, you know, and actors in Hollywood don't have the right setting in a sense. They're not used to how the world works. I mean, they create reality as they choose to. They define metaphysics as they choose to within the films they create. So a cause doesn't have to have an effect. An effect doesn't have to be produced by a cause. Essentially, they work in an industry where, in objectivist terms, it's the only place where the primacy of consciousness can work, where anything that you can conceive of can be made real, fantasy can be made real. So it's no, and then of course, within the recent films that we've seen, that tends to lead, if you've jettisoned reality, that tends to lead to you being able to create films where the villain is the protagonist and the hero is a flawed individual, and none of the free will plays any part in the success of an individual or what makes them a hero, and therefore you end up with a grey, muddy mess in the middle. So no wonder that the people who work in that kind of industry, making those kind of films that lead to that kind of result, then look at politics and see it in the same way and end up producing a grey, muddy mess in what they see, and assuming that there's compromise and there's no one's good, no one's evil, everyone's a mixture of the two. That's what I see at the broadest level.
Daniel, what did you think?
So first, about just the Oscars. So I've never watched them. I had no idea it's happening now. I usually never watch things like this, and I'm always when things like this happen, and I'm wondering if something similar happened with perhaps Ukraine or, you know, some similar conflicts in the past. Whenever things like this happen, I'm always unsure about what to really think about it. Because in one sense, if they all came out in support of Israel, would I support it? I mean, is Oscars the place for it? Should it be a place for it? It's hard to say. Maybe we can discuss this a little bit. What confused me the most about his whole speech is I had to listen to it like 4 times or something before I even understood what he said. I mean, English is my second language, but he had it written down. He could have made it clearer. So yeah, one thing he said, yeah, we stand here as men who refute their Jewishness and the Holocaust being hijacked by an occupation. And here exactly, I was like, what does he mean by occupation? Is he calling like the whole state of Israel as an occupation? Is it calling it as as it has some sort of relation, like Israel is like a relation to Holocaust? And he also said the occupation which has led to conflict for so many innocent people. Is he like blaming all deaths on Israel? So yeah, very confusing speech for something written down. And I'm wondering what you guys think about, yeah, basically these words. Like, if I take it at a face value, it really seems like one, he's calling Israel an occupation, the state of Israel, and he's blaming everything on Israel.
So one of the parts of it that I thought was quite confusing, and was maybe just more about how he delivered it, was the notable line from the speech. He said, "We're 3 men who stand here and we refute our Jewishness." Now that is the clip that's going around Twitter and is proving very controversial. Now, when I first heard him say it, that was what I heard. And it wasn't until maybe an hour ago my partner pointed out that he seems actually to mean it in a more connected way, because the full sentences, "We're three men who stand here who refute our Jewishness and the Holocaust being used to support a genocide." So they're being criticized a lot for wanting to refute their Jewishness in the sense of kind of like, we give back our identity. We don't want it anymore because Jews are committing genocide. Whereas, to be fair to them, what they seem to be saying is that we refute our Jewishness being used as a kind of just like a cover for allowing this in some way, and the memory of the Holocaust.
Again, yeah, just quickly to point it again why it confused me, because if he said, "as men who refuse their Jewishness and the Holocaust being hijacked," I think that makes sense. I don't really, and again, English is my second language, I don't really have this like connection between like saying refute and then like saying being hijacked.
Yeah, I thought it was a slightly strange way of putting it. It's not I think wrong, but it is slightly unusual, and it was almost more the cadence in which he delivered it. Now, watching it back, I think, and some people who have initially said that he was, refusing his Jewish identity, have said that they also hear it the other way now. Mark and Richard, how did you guys pick it? Because I don't think it is completely clear what he meant. I think he probably meant the latter sense, but what did you guys think?
I think the muddiness of this statement just reflect the muddiness of the brains of these people, the way they think, the way they haven't got clear the issue at all. If you think the Jewishness, if you think the Jewishness is sorry, if you think the Jewishness.
Oh, I think maybe Morgan's audio is echoing and coming back.
Okay. So, sorry about that. If you think the Jewishness is the principle behind the state of Israel, you're solely wrong, because Israel is a state that guarantees the protection of individual rights for Arabic people, Jewish people, atheists, and even Hollywood people. So if you think that the essential thing that Israel protects is Jewishness, you're solely wrong. And the reason why the people make the statement about, "I'm not anti-Semitic, I'm anti-Zionist, I just don't want an Israeli state," is wrong, is because by saying that you don't want an Israeli state, it means that instead you want a state based on the Muslimness, theocracy, and enslavement of people to a god and to the will of some caliphate somewhere in Tehran. So that's the problem with these people, that they don't understand what they're talking about and don't even seem to want to engage with it. And it's no surprise that this kind of statement come out all the time from these people who tend to sit on a fence. They don't want to take a side because, oh, well, it's too difficult to think, isn't it? It's just quite disgusting, if you ask me.
I think the statement is muddy and confusing because clarity is not its aim. The aim is to virtue signal without stating a clear position, without just trying to get the virtue without taking a side. You're trying to give every side your virtue, and therefore to muddy that up. You know, when you've written this kind of a speech for that kind of event, they've poured over every single word and every single phrase in it. It's not been written on the bus on the way there, is it? It's been carefully thought out and discussed between the three of them. So any vagueness in there is intentional. And no, you're going to know full well, working in that industry, about how it is likely to be clipped or understood, or different phrases are going to be extracted by different people. And you're offering different phrases to different people so they can interpret in different ways. And so you've got the wriggle room afterwards of making a different argument if it doesn't come off quite as clearly, quite the way you intended, or the reaction to it is different. If you stated a clear position, a really clear position, moral position, and then that was criticized subsequently, you wouldn't be able to come back on it. And the way I arrive at some of this is to look at the phrases that he says a little after that phrase, because I think that those are quite telling. When he talks about all of the victims of this dehumanization, and how do we resist? Resist what? Resist dehumanization. The word resist is obviously used in terms of resistance against the Israelis in the same way that they use the term occupation. And then they say somehow step by step, that leads to atrocity. And that somehow, step by step, the fact that you haven't analyzed and you don't understand it and you're not offering any solution, you're just saying, isn't it terrible that it ends up this way? Because if you do analyze it, if you do look at it step by step, you'll very quickly understand why compromising with evil leads to where we're at.
So I hope my audio is not doing any feedback now. So, I mean, we just had a super chat actually on this question. So Mindspan Wellness gave $10. Thank you very much. And said, can we address a common misinterpretation? He didn't refute his Judaism. He refuted using the Holocaust and his Jewish identity to justify any injustice. And then Ori Johnson Young, gave $5 and said, Mark and Richard are my favorite guests on the reality show. So there you go, guys.
You can go, guys.
Yeah, you're our favorite super chatter.
So yeah, I think probably watching it back, I think he probably did mean it in the latter sense. And I could believe it was just a mistake. But what struck me about it was what he's saying is my Jewishness and the memory of the Holocaust is not going to be used to justify what Israel is doing. But then on the flip side, because when he says that, the audience bursts into applause. So their Jewishness is being used to support what Hamas is doing, right? Or the pro-Palestinian cause, because what people are looking for is for Jews who will say, look, I'm not one of the bad Jews, I'm one of the good Jews. I don't support this and what's going on. So even though they didn't want their identity and the memory of the Holocaust, which is presumably quite meaningful to them, to be used in a malign way, it's being used malignly on the other side. And there was a good piece about this actually a few days ago on Dave Rich's Substack, where people are looking for the kind of mascot Jews who will say these kind of things to justify how they feel, because they don't want to feel like they're being anti-Semitic or harsh to Jews. So they're looking for examples of Jews who will say, no, we agree with you. And that's basically the service that these guys rendered. And it's very telling that the audience burst into applause as soon as they said that. Anything else on the speech?
Yeah, maybe, just bring it back to philosophy, something we have discussed on yesterday on the History of Philosophy study group, which everybody should join. It's accessible for both the YouTube membership and the website membership on the lowest level, so you can join us. And we have discussed Hume. One thing we discussed is the idea of cause and effect, the fact that David Hume would say, well, you don't know if the sun is gonna go up every morning. And yeah, in the same way, I feel like these people really do just almost like wake up one day, like wake up in the middle of this conflict and see, oh wow, Palestinians are dying. Nothing happened before. Let's ignore any cause and effect, how we got here. Just Palestinians are dying. Let's we have to fix it. So I think that's where, yeah, it really seems like these people are just like looking at any conflict, completely separated by anything else. Just and that's what you always see. It's always about the pictures of dying babies, starving babies. That's where all the focus is. I just saw. I'm trying to remember. I think it was the CNN had like a news panel, and behind them were like one picture of like a silhouette of a child for like every Palestinian child that died. I mean, we don't even have to go to the fact that the numbers are completely faked out by the Gaza Health Ministry, and a lot of them don't even say where the numbers are from. But yeah, this just like hyper focus on like just one statistic, and let's ignore everything else. You can't analyze conflicts like this, and we'll go to this idea of artists for ceasefire, where we can discuss this a bit more. But what do you guys think?
Well, first of all, I think that this kind of statement actually reveals a quite ugly form of racism, because Ayn Rand spoke about this in the Global Balkanization essay. Effectively, a group of people which is big enough to be a certain mass, but not quite big enough to be a population. It's small enough. If it's small enough, it's called an ethnic group. So these people want to impose their right based on the fact that they are a group of people. But doing this they ignore the whole point. What, as Daniel was saying about the cause and effect, what caused this conflict? It's the fact that in that region, all the states around the state of Israel are trying to destroy Israel. And Israel, being the moral state, being the state that protects individual rights, being the state that it's the only civilized state in the Middle East, for crying out loud, it's got the right to defend itself. And defending itself is the main function of the state, which defends its citizens within its territory. And now, if their citizens are attacked, like it happened continuously since 1948, but specifically on October the 7th, to a degree which was beyond savagery, Israel state has got the moral right to go into Gaza, destroy Hamas, and remove once and for all the threat, the real threat to the people in Israel. Now, everyone who's calling for a ceasefire or who's calling for some sort of understanding is ignoring the fact that Hamas wants to destroy Israel. It's not about supremacy. It's not about trade. It's not about being the most beautiful tyrant in the land. It's about destroying Israel and killing every single Jew left on the planet. And people keep forgetting this. And I can understand why, because it's quite a brutal statement that Hamas and the Islamic group are making. But that's the essence of the problem. If you don't deal with it, if you keep appeasing them, if you keep letting them get away with it, and in 5-6 years' time, once they regained enough strength, once those that are now kids are grown up and brainwashed into hating Jews, will be old enough to go to war again, we're going to have another October 7th. And it's going to happen over and over and over again. And these people, because they have got the kind of intellect of conceptual understanding of an animal, they only see images. They only understand what they've seen under the nose, and they cannot extrapolate and connect the dots. So every time there is something like this, they react by pulling up a card, a placard, a flag, or a little pin on the lapel. And that's what causes the problem over and over again.
Yeah. And it's uses like the term like dehumanization, woolly terms that are well down like the chain of concepts that drop so much context from them that they're trying to come up with a term that can essentially, in their minds, or at least fudge the two sides in the conflict and attempt to provide some kind of balance hidden behind the word dehumanization, but without looking at what causes it. For example, notice, for example, how they refer to the victims of October 7th in Israel or the ongoing attack in Gaza as if event A followed by event B, and they're both the same. And of course, they when they do this, that's an occasion where they never mention the hostages, which is still going on right now. It's not like event A ended and event B started. There's still all the hostages in Gaza. So that's one of the things that really strikes me. And in terms of the film that they actually won for, and I mean, Steven Spielberg has praised the film itself as being the best since Schindler's List on the Holocaust, for it highlighting the banality of evil. And I think somewhere along the line, they seem to have misunderstood what's going on in Gaza, and they seem to be applying the wrong things to it and not extracting the essentials from the conflict and understanding the bigger picture here, the principles involved.
And the banality of evil is one of Hannah Arendt's ideas, and I was reading her book, The Origins of Totalitarianism, recently, which isn't the one where she sets out the banality of evil, but it's probably one of the most influential ideas on the Holocaust ever. And what was weird about reading her book on the origins of totalitarianism is the first part of it is about the history of anti-Semitism. And she says, if I'm not mistaking her in the beginning of it, she says a lot about how the Jews sort of bring it on themselves, although she is herself Jewish. So that's really weird. I haven't finished it, so we'll see what exactly she means, but there's a lot in it that I was just flabbergasted by. So I don't know if Hannah Arendt's the best one to be basing your film on, even if the banality of evil is a valid idea. But so then on these pins, So for people who haven't seen them, and this is also something that's made its way around Twitter quite heavily, is that these people were wearing these red little pins on their lapels for the group. I think, Daniel, you said their name was Artists for a Ceasefire, something like that. And so the pins are red and they have a red hand on them. And inside the hand is a little heart. Presumably the heart is meant to signify kind of love or peace or something. And it's become a very criticized symbol because for a lot of Israelis and Jews, what a red hand like that symbolizes in the context of the conflict are the lynches in Ramallah in 2000. And so for anyone who's not familiar with them, basically in 2000, 2 Israeli soldiers took a wrong turn, basically, and ended up in Ramallah and were arrested and taken to the local police station. And a Palestinian mob burst in, murdered them. And as a crowd gathered around the police station to cheer them for what they'd done and celebrate it, a young man who'd participated in the murders had dipped his hands in the blood and banged them on the window like that. It's a very famous image with his hands covered in blood. And some people are making the suggestion that the comparison is purposeful, and I suspect not. And I'd suspect that someone like Billie Eilish and Mark Ruffalo don't know that connection. They probably don't even know about the lynching in Ramallah. But what's very telling about this is that people didn't care, because it is a very conspicuous image, and in the minds of a lot of people would bring up that connection. And the worry, in effect, is, was this purposeful? So even if it's meant to symbolize, blood on your hands in the sense of if there's no ceasefire, there's blood on your hands, is it also a little bit of sort of grit in the eye to the Israelis to remind them of this horrible, horrible event? What did you guys, Daniel, what did you think about it?
So I tried looking up what the symbols, like what is it trying to show. The only thing I found is that it symbolizes, hope for peace, hope for ceasefire, things like that, but nothing specific. I really hope it's not actually, referring to Ramallah, because that was brutal, and like like making that connection. Well, one thing I would say, it really something that doesn't surprise me. Yeah, it's the fact, just like thinking that the calling for ceasefire is somehow like oh, that's it. We just call for a ceasefire and everything is solved. Nothing else is happening. Peace in the Middle East. And one thing that I've noticed is, I think one person that made an interview, maybe you can remind me who it was, even cited Biden as, even Biden administration is calling for ceasefire. So a lot of them are, sort of outsourcing their ideas to, the leaders who should know better. These are artists, as we said. I'm not expecting him to have like a deep knowledge on, Israel-Palestine conflict. So a lot of them are just, looking up what are the leaders saying, what are the, UN officials saying. Everyone, a lot of people are, citing UN experts, and that's and it's not necessarily wrong. I mean, not everyone has, you don't have a time to research every conflict. You don't have a time to, have a specialization in everything. So having some sort of authorities is good, but that's why it's really important to have these authorities actually stand for something and stand for something good, and not, let us down as it happens with specifically the Biden administration now.
Mark and Richard, what did you think about the badges?
But by default, I hate people wearing this kind of stuff, because all it is, I'm just outsources my moral judgment and my thinking to somebody else who told me this is good, this is bad. None of these people would ever wear a little swastika, would they? Because they know what it means, or at least, they've been conditioned in knowing what it means. This kind of use of symbols, a symbol stands for a concept or an idea. But these people don't have concepts or ideas. They don't use them. They don't care for them. all they do, they just want to identify themselves as the good guys by wearing the bâton du jour, and by saying, by wearing this, you can't attack me because I'm with a clique. It's like the Mason special handshake, that you identify yourself to another Mason by making a certain movement of the finger, and that kind of behavior is I think is the lowest and one of the most rotten events of the universe, because they're effectively separating themselves from the crowd by saying, "Look at me, I'm good. Everybody else, they don't even have the gas to wear it, and if they don't wear it, they're bad automatically." It doesn't matter if they then stand for the support of Hamas or support of the animals who put a leaflet, for example, in New York, saying that even children are occupiers. I mean, all these kind of people that morally they are the lowest of the low, but they choose not to think.
I think on this particular badge, whether it is because of the Ramallah event or whether it's intended to mean like a stop hand with a heart on it, as in stop, ceasefire now, only love, and that sort of vacuous, divorced from reality statement that just wants, as I said before, an effect without initiating the cause that's going to ensure it lasts, is hard to say. I mean, when you mention that Ramallah event and the bloody hands and the picture that I've seen of that event, it reminds me of the event on London streets. It was over 10 years ago, with the murder of Lee Rigby by an Islamist on the streets of London, then tried to hack his head, the Fusilier who was murdered, and then they tried to hack his head off and then dipped his hands in the blood and held them up to cameras in a similar type of manner. And of course, who does that? Only those that worship death. Only those from an Islamist, stance do that in the first place. So I think one of the other badges that I think has been brought to the fore recently is the little yellow ribbon, which I think is supposed to support the hostages, as I understand it. And according to one article that I read, there was only one person on the red carpet wearing the little yellow ribbon. So even if you take the virtue signaling side of it, the which camp are you in or not, there's a certain camp which is almost impossible for people to think they can be publicly seen to adopt such a ceremony, and therefore that speaks volumes about where the opinion is on this, and where the cowardice lies as well.
Yes. So, I mean, my thought about the badges are that what it is at best is a really clumsy image. And for the people wearing them, almost certainly I think they don't know about the lynching in Ramallah. And one person commented on it, saying that they just seem to be broadcasting their ignorance to the world, because the lynching in Ramallah was one of the major events of the Second Intifada, and it was only in 2000, which obviously feels like a long time ago, but it's not like it was something in 1948, which was way beyond all these people's lifetimes. So something that strikes me often about these people is that they have this kind of a part of the reason why I don't respect them doing this, in a sense, because Daniel, you mentioned before, what if they were speaking up in favor of Israel? Is there's a strong second-handedness about the way they broadcast their political opinions in these ways, where it seems to be that they're doing it, and they're doing it so fervently because they're in a room of people who will clap along. They don't seem to, if their whole industry was set against them, would they do it? Would they stand up there and say it? I'm not convinced. And certainly some of their zeal seems to be kind of amplified by the fact that they're in this kind of echo chamber. And if you think about, I think, was it the Oscars in 2016 or 17 when Trump came in, and the guy who's in Stranger Things, who plays the police officer, stands up and makes the speech about immigration. Now, it's not like I disagree, I might for closed borders or anything, but the tone of his speech was really sanctimonious and kind of everyone backslapping. And that's what I think turns me off the most about it. And then also the fact that to these people, these aren't really serious political convictions. I'm sure they feel kind of emotional intensity in their chest about it, but once this is over, they'll go about their days and forget about it. And if they're successful in bringing about a ceasefire, they'll forget about it until it breaks out again, and then they'll get very activated. And it's not like people have to devote all their time and their lives to these causes, but there's something shallow about their opinions, I think. Like so Mark Ruffalo, when he walked into the event, sort of held up his fist and said humanity wins, and it's just asinine, utterly asinine. So Daniel's saying someone in the chat says it's the red hand of Ulster. Well, I'd probably be really pissed off if that's true. But anyway, so anything else to say about these?
I just, because I'm kind of confused, because people are saying it's a bad thing. Can someone tell me the story of it? Because from what I understand, it wasn't like supposed to be like a bad thing.
Mark and Richard?
We can leave this to another episode, because you can't make justice to this whole story without telling the whole farce of Ireland and its struggle for independence. So I'm much rather leave it to another time. But I wanted to mention something. You mentioned twice the applause in the crowd. Actually, when you see the audience in front of the stage, you don't actually see many people clapping. Certainly, you don't see, compared to the kind of noise you hear, you can't match it with the actual movement of the crowd. I know that it's a big theater and probably the microphone was stuck under the hoi polloi, which are probably more likely to take a side because they don't risk a career if they make the wrong move. But I don't know whether to be encouraged by the fact not many people clapped, or whether it's just a matter of they didn't really want to take a position on either side because they fear for their own careers. I'd like to think probably there are more people who think than we assume, but it might not be the case. And again, this wearing of pins and stuff, most people probably are told by their PR agency what to wear on the night. You could ask any of them, what does this ribbon mean? What does the color mean? None of them would have a clue, because most of them are just result of a show business, really.
Yeah, you kind of like some of the journalists on the red carpet to ask them the same questions as some of these YouTubers have of protesters on marches and stuff, and see if they could get them to agree to the full list of Hamas's charter when it's listed to them on the red carpet as a celebrity, because then you'd soon change their position, because there's a lot of ignorance there as well. But it's the fact that they have such a high-profile platform that so many people choose to take their lead from celebrities without analyzing any details or facts behind what a position is, that makes this such a toxic problem, really.
Yeah. Go on, Daniel. Go on.
Well, something I would say about pins, because Marco and Richard know, I do wear a pin almost all the time whenever I go out, and I very much stand by it. But something about the pin is, I think it's, when you want to show support for something, it's good. But I think it should be clear. So, for example, if you had like a Israeli pin, I think it's pretty clear what you stand for. But if you have a PLO flag, especially after October 7 attacks, what are you really saying? Are you supporting October 7 attacks? Are you supporting Hamas? What do you really stand for? And it's similar with this, Artists for Ceasefire. We don't really even know what it's supposed to stand for. I mean, something general, but we don't have like the actual symbolism, to the point that it might actually refer to the Ramallah, and we wouldn't know. And again, calling for ceasefire, again, it's completely devoid of any meaning. So I think there is a case to be made for like wearing pins, showing your support. But again, I think it should be much more clear than whatever is happening here. And the similar thing happened with Mark Ruffalo when he got late to the Oscars because of the protesters, but he was like supportive, like we it's starting late because of these protesters, and I'm like, what? So why are you here? Like, why aren't you out there with them if what they're doing is like right? Again, this sort of just confused me.
Yeah, and I think it's the overriding shallowness of their demonstration and point of view, in effect, that is what stands out. And that's why, in effect, I would be so peed off if it were the red hand of Ulster that they were using. It's not like that's an inherently IRA symbol. It's a symbol for the county of Ulster. But for these people, knowing what they support, I suspect these people would be using it from a kind of pro-unification, pro-IRA perspective. Now, it's not like I have a nuanced opinion about Ireland, but Ireland is such a traumatic and difficult area of history for my country and for my parents who grew up under the fear of the IRA killing them. That I would think is absolutely disgusting if they were mixing in any Irish imagery here. One of my dad's shoe shops was blown up by the IRA, so he was very nearly killed by them. So the IRA is a very serious issue, and if these people
just quickly, the person who brought it as an example of like red hand imagery. I don't think it was actually making case that. I don't think anyone is making case that the symbolism is meant to be to the Ulsters.
Okay, well, good. I feel a bit less angry now. We have another super chat from Enric Teller for $5 who says Hamas and associates probably see themselves winning even if all of Gaza is defeated, if the propaganda war is won. I suspect that's kind of true. Like, I think obviously they would rather win, or in a sense get another ceasefire. But yeah, I suspect they kind of know that if they win the moral war and if they guilt Israel, then in a sense the Palestinian cause is furthered and that'll undermine Israel. I think there's something there. Do you guys agree with that?
Well, yeah, for sure. And sorry, and certainly from the safety for the leadership in luxury in Qatar, risking nothing, the moral war is enough for them. Moral in the sense that the way people judge it in the wider culture erroneously, of course.
And to be honest, all 25 billion people in Gaza are dead now. So if they don't win the propaganda war, they're not going to win the physical one, are they?
And important thing is, at the end of the day, they don't really. It's not like, Palestinians really care about life. If they did, they would get rid of Hamas, Fatah, and actually try to. I really like there's like a TikTok history like rap song, and he brought up the example of like past ethnic sort of people who were suppressed, and he asked, okay, what happened to them? They moved on, they built something, they made something to last. You don't see that with the Palestinians, because for them killing Jews or dying in the pursuit of killing Jews is enough for them.
Yeah, and the Jews have been oppressed quite a while for the last 2,000 years. So,
And look at what's missing from this Oscars ceremony. The hashtag Me Too movement, and everything that happened on October 7th. No mention of that. It's no mention of the hostages themselves. It's the omissions that are just shout their name from the rooftops.
Was there anything else about the Oscars that stood out to you guys before we go on to our next topic? Because I mean, I'm trying to think of some ways to connect this back to Rand, and the only way that I can consciously connect it back to the Oscars, I think that Leonard Peikoff tells a story once. I think it's in is it My 30 Years with Ayn Rand, that talk? I think he tells a story about watching the Oscars with her. It's not particularly relevant for tonight, but maybe just the fact that, so apparently I think it's the Oscars or the Golden Globes, something like that. And it's the year that a young man ran across the stage naked and sort of, I don't know, spread his cheeks or something. And Ayn Rand was really appalled by it. And Peikoff asked her why. And she said, because this is a sort of high, sort of glamorous occasion where sort of people who are perceived as being important and accomplished go to receive awards for being at the top of their profession. And the whole country tunes in because they love it. And what this guy wanted to do was run across and make it crass and nasty and low and mean. And so she thought it was a real act of nihilism. And there's something to say about the Oscar ceremonies generally with that, maybe in recent years, maybe like, although I've enjoyed a lot of Ricky Gervais's speeches because they're very funny, there's perhaps he's introducing an element of the kind of tearing it down a little bit. And I think maybe that's deserved given some of the ways in which Hollywood stars have kind of become more fallen, corrupted figures than they maybe used to be. But certainly the shallow, sanctimonious politicization of these events, I think, does mar it and tear it down as well. And it seems to be based on this idea that comes from the culture that if you have any platform, it has to be used for fighting injustice. There is no such thing as neutrality. Neutrality is itself taking a side. But go on, Marco, like you were going to say something.
Well, talk about nihilism. I mean, the ceremony itself included a guy who presented for best costume, and he turned up butt naked on the stage, and it was part of the thing, part of the presentation, the actual rehearsal. This BS. That's the most appalling thing, especially because you're talking about the best costume. It's particularly nihilistic, I think. And if a streaker running along was a bad thing, actually making it part of the ceremony is beyond appalling.
And that's what they do here. Jimmy Kimmel presenting actually shows a clip and refers to that incident of the streaker from the 70s, from 1974, when David Niven's presenting an award and the streaker comes across the stage to introduce the piece where John Cena comes on in the buff. So you're actually turning from making what was a nihilistic event actually part of the ceremony as a deliberate choice to include a nihilistic event, rather than it just having occurred, with security unable to stop it back in the 70s. It shows the deterioration of the culture.
I'd seen him come onto the stage naked holding the little placard. I actually hadn't seen the introduction where they play that clip. That's interesting. That would have been a more obvious comparison. Yeah, I think although it's amusing and everyone titters when he comes out, there's a way in which if you do too much kind of silliness on these things, it ends up souring it as well, I think. But okay, if there's nothing else, should we move to the UNRWA story just in the last 10 minutes or so? So this is the statement by Lazzarini, and this is almost becoming a bit of a rehearsed script from him recently, which is saying that it looks possible that UNRWA is going to completely run out of money in the next few weeks unless more countries start giving money back again. And so this is very similar to what he was saying when the funding was initially cut off. And he was saying that unless it's resumed by the end of February, UNRWA is going to be bankrupt. And I was very disappointed once February ended that lo and behold, the UNRWA is still around. But happy days, it seems that they aren't doing so well, even though some countries have resumed funding and given fairly large sums. I presume that in a sense, they can't cut back on their operational costs, whatever, and operate within a smaller budget. I presume they just they have to have these huge amounts of funds coming in order to do their work. But I'm not too sure. What did you guys think about the UNRWA funding story? Daniel, let's start with you.
We can start with Marco and Richard. My lines are going to be pretty short.
Well, to be honest, if only UNRWA run out of business, but it's not going to happen. The guy, as soon as the whole controversy of the people who directly linked to the Hamas attack on October the 7th, working for UNRWA, came out in the open, the guy clearly knew his job at no point was ever on the line. He knew that the whole enterprise would have carried on and more Hamas people would have been paid off and supported and funded through whichever activities that UNRWA pretends to do. And to be honest, the fact that there is a so-called review of the activity of UNRWA in the light of these accusation, yeah, right. I mean, there is an investigation right now, the internal investigation, that probably the outcome will be like, yeah, UNRWA wasn't funded enough, therefore some elements of Hamas were infiltrating. And of course, we didn't have the funds to make sure that these things didn't happen. But all this guy, I mean, the European Union already has resumed the funding for this bracket of terrorism. And you can guarantee after this whitewash of a report, people will start paying back and start going back funding UNRWA. I mean, Ireland, I think Portugal and Spain, not Portugal, Spain for sure, keep funding, and in fact they give them more money. There are instances where even Scotland unilaterally gave them more money. I mean, come on. They know they're not in danger. It's a UN organization. They've got at least, if not the support of US, UK, and France, at least got the support of China and Russia, who are, on the Security Council. So he knows he's like a mafia boss. He knows that he's totally safe with his attack dogs around.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you can see that in Philip Lazarini's smug face half the time. I think you've got the different categories of countries. You've got those for whom even the initial accusations weren't enough to stop funding, like Marco mentioned, countries like Ireland. You've got those moving in the herd. That some countries like to stay in the center of the herd and just move with the herd regardless of what it's doing. Some lag along, and once a load of countries have made a move, they'll come along in one way or the other, and that'll took them out of funding it for a while, but will bring them back in at the in the same manner. Always with pragmatism and trying not to have any convictions or stick your head above the parapet at all. So all of that's the case. I mean, the most recent two are Sweden and Canada, who've just restarted funding UNRWA. Sweden is the 4th largest contributor to its budget, Canada the 11th largest. So those are already significant returnees, and that's even before the report is out with any of the details that will have been, as Marcus said, whitewashed and diminished and explained away. And what's being argued is the justification for refunding at this point, just to claim that UNRWA, quote, agreed to more checks on spending and staff. We'll be more careful next time, lads. That's enough for you? Yeah, all right. Checks in the post.
Yeah, I mean, so what has been so extraordinary about the UNRWA funding, story as it's been unfolding for the last few months is the way in which people have been kind of uber skeptical about whether UNRWA has even done anything at all. And they seem to be kind of hyper focusing their consciousness just into the last few months since October 7th and saying, look, you need to provide some evidence from here. Now, Israel has been doing that, although they'll say they haven't. They've just off the top of my head, just the video of the guy getting out of his truck and pulling the corpse of the Jewish man into the back, who was confirmed to be an UNRWA employee, right? So there's this kind of evidence coming out, but they'll deny that Israel's giving anything and just keep saying, look, we'll accept it if Israel provides some evidence, but you're not doing it when Israel is. But stories about UNRWA have been coming out for years and years and years, and there's no real grounds on which to reject them, except if you're just dismissing them as arbitrary. Except you need real grounds to be doing that. And groups like UN Watch, who are putting out these periodic reviews into UNRWA and reports, I've been reporting on it for years and years and years. So there's something about UNRWA that people just won't let go. There's something like it seems to be a moral symbol of one side and the other. UNRWA, let's not forget, its crime, in effect, is allowing and facilitating the perpetuation of the conflict by indoctrinating young children into the Hamas propaganda line, that the people who gave their lives to murder and martyr themselves, to murder Jews and martyr themselves, are heroes, and that the creation of Israel was a crime, and that their land was stolen and they need to go back and they're refugees. All this crap is what UNRWA schools were indoctrinating children into. And that's such a serious crime. And yet people are utterly flippant about it. So it's just extraordinary that people keep denying this and keep denying that the evidence is coming out when it is. And that's not going to look good in a few years' time, people. People always vindicate themselves rather tellingly by saying, you're on the wrong side of history, or I'll be on the right side of history. I don't think this is going to look very good in 365 days. But Daniel, what did you think?
So yeah, UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, and what is left out for Palestine refugees in the Near East. There is this special agency just for the Palestinian refugees, and then there is the other agency dealing with all the other refugees. And when I first read the story, the UNRWA chief Philip Lazzarini says, agency has a risk of death. The first reaction was like, promise? Because I really hope we actually can get rid of it. And as it was stated before, I'm not sure if we will actually achieve that because of, many nations have restored their funding. But nothing has changed since they actually stopped this funding. And the reason why they stopped this funding is they found out not only that Hamas members were inside of UNRWA, like actual UNRWA employees, the UNRWA employees have participated in October 7 attacks. This fact hasn't magically changed. We are not living in a different dimension where we somehow fixed it and that didn't happen. We are still living in the same reality when that did happen. So I don't see any reason for any of these nations restoring its funding unless they they haven't really cared at the start, and it was just some sort of like, temporary move. I don't have much to say. I really hope we soon will be able to stop talking about UNRWA and we'll talk about the next organization that comes after this. But I'm somewhat worried that UNRWA will persist even after this.
And what about all the physical evidence is also ignored? The tunnels under UNRWA headquarters and schools, the data center under the headquarters, and the power supply from above, all the weaponry in the hospitals, and all that kind of stuff. All of that is physical evidence that is ignored in the claim that Israel hasn't supplied evidence. I mean, it's there to be seen. And of course, I can't help but mention that, the fact that Trump defunded UNRWA for a considerable amount of time and it still didn't go under. So why would it go under after an even briefer period of time before everybody comes crawling back and decides to fund it anyway because they don't want to be accused of anything? And of course, altruism drives them every step of the way.
And it's a UN, so they're going to be able to find a line of the budget that can hide and still divert funds to UNRWA. So no problem.
So
unfortunately, one of the major guys who was a spokesman for UNRWA, I think until 2019 or something, this guy called Chris Gunners, who crawled out of the woodwork once UNRWA was having these allegations put against them again. And there's a great clip from when UNRWA was had the initial round of defunding happened, of him breaking down crying doing a news interview. And I really hope we get another instance of that, where once UNRWA goes under, Chris Gunners cries again. Because he's really evil. If you go look at some of his statements, he is so awful. So I hope that he doesn't receive any more funding from UNRWA either, because that is coming all from Western taxpayers.
Yeah.
So just
Go
quickly, no, because I don't have a serious point, so you can go first.
Well, I was only to mention the work of UN Watch and how long they've been exposing UNRWA and the attitudes to them from UNRWA. In terms of not even, trying to criticize them enormously and not even looking at investigating any of their points, together with, some of the stuff that's been exposed on this channel, in part with interviews with the Telegram, all the teachers in UNRWA schools and what they were saying behind the scenes right on October 7th. I mean, all of that is evidence.
So it's just something that I wanted to say. I was waiting for an opportunity to say this for a while now, for a couple of months actually. So there was this story coming out of New York that there's been this some sectarian or some Orthodox Jews basically living in a certain place, and they were trying to dig up a basement basically to expand the synagogue or whatever, but they didn't have a permission, so they were trying to do it illegally. And there were stories about people hearing Yiddish in the walls, and they quickly found them. So it's like the Jews cannot dig out even one basement without someone finding out, but the Palestinians can dig up all of Gaza, and somehow no one hears about it. So that's my one joke that I had for a couple of months.
The problem, everybody heard about it and didn't want to do anything about it.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, unless there's anything else, we can wrap up. So thank you very much for watching, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow with the Daily Objective and the reality show. Do we have anything going at 7 o'clock, Daniel?
Not today. But
Not
tomorrow
today.
we have the Fountainhead Book Club. We are about 90 sessions in. So if you want to join, we are just wrapping up the whole book, but there's a lot of material if you want to. We have everything recorded, so if you want to go back, link to become a member is in the chat.
And those are all recorded as well, so you can catch up on the previous sessions too. Cool. All right. Well, we hope to see everyone tomorrow on the reality show, and thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.